Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just click the link in the show description to support now.
You're locked in.
Look at what we have here, folks.
To the only show that matters.
The cream of the crop.
Duke Loves Rasslin.
And there is no one that does it better than
your host.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass.
The Duke.
And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Hello, I'm Chris Bournea. I'm the writer-director of the documentary Lady Wrestler, the amazing untold story of African-American women in the ring. I'm also a journalist based in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm very happy to be here.
Well, Chris, I am just over the moon about you being here on the Duke Loves Rasslin podcast. I mean, you know, you're a person that I just recently have interacted with one-on-one, and I got to be honest with you, man, I feel like I've known you forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like, you know, one of those where those souls you feel like you've known somewhere before. Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, please. It's honestly, it's a pleasure. And I know that the listeners of the Duke Loves Rasslin podcast, they're pretty happy to hear your voice on this show because you're definitely a guest that everyone's been saying, you got to get Chris on the show. You got to get Chris on the show. So this is cool. I wonder about something, Chris, because you're so easy to talk to and instantly it's like whatever guards that we have up naturally in life, you're one of those people that instantly they just drop because you're just a regular, cool, easygoing guy. Do you find that that's helped you a lot in your career as a journalist and now as a director?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for saying that. Yeah, and you know what? I think it's something that I've worked at. Believe it or not, I'm actually a very shy, somewhat introverted person. I'm sort of like a contradiction where I'm shy, but I like attention. Under the right circumstances. But, you know, if you took me to a party, I would sort of be a wallflower and just only hang around you and the people that I know. But I starting from when I was very young, one of the first self-help books I read was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And I know that sounds corny and trite, but actually a lot of the things in there, even though that book was written like decades ago, like the 40s or 50s or whenever, a lot of the techniques are universal to interactions with people. Like, try to lead with something positive. You know, if you're having a conflict with someone, rather than, you know, getting up in their face and telling them off, try to find something positive as, you know, to use as a jumping off point. And I think if you just approach people with a basic intention of wanting to have respect and, you know, keeping whatever ego you have in check, I think that really helps smooth out relations. But it's definitely emotional intelligence, that whole movement that kind of started in the 90s. That's definitely something I've studied. I mean, not formally, but definitely reading books about it and, you know, watching videos and lectures about it. That's definitely something I've studied.
You know, Chris, I got to commend you on your response to that question, because that's not an easy question to answer because it requires a person to think about themselves in a way that maybe they've never thought about themselves before. And yet, you clearly are somebody that is in touch with who you are. You're clear on who you are. And like you said, it's something that you worked at. So, you know, again, kudos to you, man, because you've done a very good job.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, you know, it's like, I think that's sort of like one of the gifts about being somewhat shy and introspective is you tend to be, like I said, you tend to be introspective. You tend to, rather than your personality always focused on what's outside of you and where's the next party and, you know, how can I put a lampshade on my head and get attention? I tend to be very, very analytical and very like almost to a fault. Like, oh, if I say this to this person, and that's not to say sometimes I put my foot in my mouth or I'm about to say something and I can tell this is going to offend the person, but it just slips out anyway. But I feel like being introspective, you tend to be very analytical. And that can be both a blessing and a curse because, you know, sometimes I will lose out on an opportunity because it's like, oh, there's that person I've always wanted to meet and I have to work up the nerve to approach them. And then by the time I work up the nerve that, you know, they're gone down the street. But also being analytical helps you in interpersonal relationships because you do tend to think before you speak and kind of think about, well, how are my actions going to affect someone else? And I'm someone where, I revise text. Like if I'm replying to someone, I don't just shoot off a text. I think about, well, what is the most diplomatic way for me to say this? Even though right now I feel like ripping their head off. let me take a beat and, try to take a breath and respond with emotional intelligence.
That cracks me up because here you are, like you said, you revise text. So you're careful and selective on how you're communicating, especially when you're in your emotions, where somebody frustrated you or what have you, and you kind of have to set them straight, but you want to be careful not to go too far. So I do wonder how the heck does that work when you're writing and then directing your first documentary ever, Lady Wrestler, the amazing untold story of African-American women in the ring. For a guy that revises text messages, did you have to rewrite this documentary over and over again?
Well, I think actually being somebody who's kind of cautious with people actually helped the ladies that I interviewed, Ethel Johnson and Ramona Isbell and their families. It actually helped put their guard down because instead of feeling like I'm like, either a journalist who's just trying to get their story to make a name for themselves or, a filmmaker who's just trying to use them to make his first movie and get a name for himself. It was like, and not to ring my own bell, but it's like, I think they could kind of tell I'm someone who's genuinely interested in their story and somebody who's, I hate to use the word polite because polite kind of makes you sound like you're just a doormat and you let people walk all over you. But someone who has, instead of, just saying, okay, I want you to do this interview, saying, hey, Miss Ethel, you have a really interesting story. Would you be interested in, maybe telling your story on camera sometime? It's sort of like knowing how to interact with people and being kind of cautious in the way that I interact with them, I think helped put the ladies at ease. So it was definitely having that analytical, that kind of like, let me pause before I speak and pause and, kind of coming across as kind of meek and, shy. I think that lowered their guard and kind of helped form a bond between us, a bond of trust. That definitely helped.
I'm gonna throw a suggestion at you, and instead of polite, I would call it compassionate. You care about people, and you care enough about their story that you approach it in a respectful and thoughtful manner.
Yes, thank you. That was definitely the approach that I took.
Absolutely. Because I'll tell you, and this, it is not easy to interview seniors, and especially seniors who, for one reason or another, who have been mistreated in life. Right. But I have, please.
I do have to say with Miss Ethel and Miss Ramona, they are the sharpest. Well, Miss Ethel passed away in 2018, but Miss Ramona is still alive and well. They are the sharpest people that I know. I mean, they have like steel trap memories of things that happened to them in the 50s and 60s. So, like you say, when sometimes when you talk to seniors in everyday life, and not to be disrespectful, but it can be kind of rambling and, they don't remember certain details and let me tell you about this thing that happened back in 56. And then it, takes them forever. They are like born storytellers because they could just rattle stuff off of, oh yeah, I was in San Francisco and I hung out with the Black Panthers after a match one time and we went and had soul food and pigged out. Miss Ramona told me that's a little anecdote that's not in the documentary. Miss Ethel was like, one time I was in Arkansas and I remember going into this hotel and they didn't want Black people there. I mean, they were just so sharp. They were easy to talk to, more so than like some people half their age. So I think they're just they're just the kind of people, they were like born to be on television. They're just born performers.
Well, and you definitely help them display that. There's no two ways about it. I mean, again, Lady Wrestler, the amazing untold story of African-American women in the ring. It's something that has not been covered enough historically. So it was really interesting to see this pop up. I mean, what motivated you to pursue this story and to develop it into a full documentary and what have you.
Yeah, so what you said is just absolutely accurate, that this has not been covered enough historically. And so I was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. You know, I'm African American, so I grew up in the Black community. And I never heard about these women until I was an adult, which I think is just crazy. Like, I should have been taught, our local Black history should have been taught to me and other children in schools. So the way I found out about their story was I had gotten one of my first jobs as a journalist working at This Week News, which is a local community newspaper that's a subsidiary of the daily newspaper, the Columbus Dispatch. And there's an African American man named Terry Anderson who works in public relations, who grew up with Ethel Johnson's daughter, Shelley, who every time I would call Terry for story ideas, he'd say, you know, there's this really interesting lady you should sit down and interview sometime. And that turned out to be Miss Ethel. So Terry arranged an interview for us. This was way back in December of 2005. And the stories that Miss Ethel had to tell was just amazing, of going all over the world when she was a teenager and into her 20s and 30s, you know, as a young woman, just traveling the world in the 50s and 60s during segregation, going to places like Cuba before the embargo was in place. And it just, like I always say, it didn't take Orson Welles to figure out that they had these Ethel and Ramona and women like her, their peers at the time. They just have this very cinematic story. So in the course of doing research, so I decided to put Miss Ethel's story together as an article for the Columbus Dispatch. And in the course of doing research for the article, I came across the documentary Lipstick and Dynamite. And I say this not to put down that documentary and not to put down the woman who made that documentary, but that documentary only featured white women from the era that Ethel and Ramona were wrestling in, the 50s and 60s, you know, like Fabulous Moolah and Penny Banner. And I actually interviewed Penny Banner for the original newspaper article that I made, but she had passed away by the time I started working on the documentary. Anyway, so in the course of doing this research and seeing the Lipstick and Dynamite documentary, I thought, well, if anyone deserves their own movie, it's these Black women who not only dealt with sexism, but racism, and going into wrestle into towns in the Deep South where they had to deal with Jim Crow and the threat of the Ku Klux Klan chasing them out of town. So I just thought, and a side note is Arnold Schwarzenegger has played a key role in this. Yes, that Arnold Schwarzenegger from the Terminator. He holds an annual fitness festival in Columbus called the Arnold Classic. Well, I think it's called the Arnold Sports Festival now. But anyway, he started holding this festival in Columbus because he earned one of his first bodybuilding titles in Columbus and decided that the city had been good to him, so he was going to kind of return the love. So when the article with Miss Ethel was published in March of 2006 for Women's History Month, Arnold Schwarzenegger's people saw the article and called me at the newspaper and was like, we want to give Ethel Johnson a Lifetime Achievement Award at our closing ceremony. And by that time, Ethel was a retired grandmother, and anyone who sees the documentary will find out that even during her career, she did not tell people about her career as a wrestler. She kept that part of her life secret. And when she was home, she was a wife and mother. And when she was wrestling, she kept the two aspects of her life separate. So I called Ethel's daughter, Shelley, and said, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger wants to honor your mother with a Lifetime Achievement Award. And I could just tell from Shelley's voice that she didn't think her mother would go for it. And sure enough, Shelley called me back and was like, Mom said, tell them thanks, but no thanks. So I just thought, if Arnold Schwarzenegger, this international, not only movie star, but fitness icon, sees the value in Miss Ethel's story, then there's something more to it than one newspaper article. So I just called Miss Ethel and said, hey, would you be willing? Your story is really, really amazing. Would you be interested or available to be interviewed on camera sometime? And to my surprise, she said yes. So we did interviews over the course of several years, and that led me to Ramona and finding out that there were dozens of these women, many of them from my hometown of Columbus, Ohio, that I'd never even heard about growing up. And my very first newspaper job was at the Call-and-Post, which is the oldest African-American newspaper in Ohio and one of the oldest African-American newspapers in the nation, and is owned by Don King, the boxing promoter. And I never heard about these women working for the Call-and-Post. So that just goes to show you how underground their story was.
You know, there's a lot to unpack from what you just said there. And I'm just I'm floored because I was going to ask you about Lipstick and Dynamite. I was going to ask you about that because that's exactly what your documentary reminded me of, but the black version.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's funny that you say that's exactly, the intention there. You saw this, which Lipstick and Dynamite, I encourage anybody to go watch. It is a strong documentary. It talks about
absolutely
the pioneers of women's wrestling and what have you, but absolutely what you just said, Chris. Where's the black people?
Yeah, there was one woman, one of the wrestlers, I forget which one, who casually mentioned Babs Wingo, who was the first African American female wrestler in pro wrestling, who was recruited by Billy Wolf, who founded the women's wrestling organization in the 30s that sparked what they call the golden age of women's wrestling. This one of the women in Lipstick and Dynamite just casually said, "Oh yeah, I think I wrestled," or she just casually mentioned Babs Wingo, but there was not even a picture of Babs on screen when the woman mentioned her. She just said, "Yeah, there was a black lady wrestler named Babs Wingo that I wrestled one time," or just a casual passing reference.
Chris, we live in a society where a lot of folks will say, well, come on, why do you always got to make it about race? Why do you got to bring up race? Right? People who want to shy away from having honest conversation and discussion about systemic racism and microaggressions, macroaggressions. This is a prime example. I mean, literally, you have this documentary that's supposed to shine a light on the pioneers of women's wrestling, and they essentially ignored black women who contributed to the industry all the way back, and ignored it to the point where we didn't even know that black women existed in wrestling during those times, just like you said. I mean, you're over here doing research for this project, and you find out, oh my goodness, there was a whole collective. This was a whole thing. We're not just talking one or two people here. This was a thing. You know what I'm saying? And just like everything else in life, people of color, including black folk here in America, our contributions have largely been erased. And it is so unfortunate that history will not know most of what we've done in this country, years and years ago. Yet it is so wonderful when a person like yourself comes along and says, something, I'm going to shine a light. I'm going to help correct the record on this particular issue here. I want to, and it's interesting that you say you worked for a paper that's the oldest African-American owned newspaper in the area there, because that lets me know that you're pretty serious about your roots, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just do want to clarify. I'm not criticizing Ruth. I can't remember her last name. Ruth, who directed Lipstick and Dynamite. I don't think she intentionally excluded the black women. I just think it was like how a lot of white people may have blinders on, that they don't realize a person of color or somebody who's more attuned to race relations. That detail when she did that interview with that wrestler and she mentioned, oh yeah, there was a black woman that I wrestled. Someone who was a little maybe more attuned may have thought, oh, that must have been during the civil rights movement or before the civil rights movement. That's a whole other chapter I should explore. So I'm not saying she intentionally excluded her, but it's more so like the kind of not, being, as Maya Angelou said, being ignorant of being ignorant, like not knowing what your blind side, your blinders are keeping you from seeing. So I think that's more what it was in the case of Lipstick and Dynamite. But absolutely, in a broader context, talking about society, yes, there have been intentional efforts to either erase Black history or not give full credit where credit is due. Absolutely.
Well said. Well said. And that's a fair point that you made there. It probably and more than likely was not intentional, but it's unfortunate. And again, that's why it's so important for all of us. And you did it with your project here to correct the record and to say, hey, no, we were there as well. And we had contributions as well, which is wonderful. Chris, I want to ask you about something because I know when you did this project, you just wanted to shine a light on the story. You wanted to provide some historical record of these wonderful women who contribute to the pro wrestling industry. Did you ever imagine in your wildest dreams when you were doing this documentary that one of the primary folks in the documentary would be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that wasn't, I have to say that wasn't on my mind at all. And periodically throughout the making of and the distribution or, different screenings of the documentary, people would say to me, oh, you should contact the WWE. And it was like one of those things where it was like, okay, I'll put that on the to-do list. But it wasn't, for some reason, it wasn't at the forefront of my mind. And so when I found out that Ethel Johnson had just been inducted, earlier this month in April of 2021 into the Hall of Fame, my first reaction was, wow, I'm just so glad she's finally getting the recognition, because she really didn't get and part of it was she didn't want the attention, but it was partly that. But my first reaction was just being thrilled and elated that she was being recognized. But no, I have to say, honestly, that wasn't the WWE, and anything having to do with the WWE wasn't in my mind at all when I was making the documentary.
There's been a little controversy. The family of Miss Ethel has spoken out, and they have made it clear that the WWE has not reached out to them about this Hall of Fame induction of their family member here. And to go even a step further, the video package that was utilized that was supposed to highlight Miss Ethel didn't even, they were using different people. So can you clarify that for me for a moment here? Because it is kind of confusing here. What the heck happened?
Yeah. So what happened was that in the induction video, first of all, the WWE did not contact the family ahead of time to let them know that Ethel was being inducted into the Hall of Fame. So the family found out about it through social media, which is just, I'm sure maybe like me, their first reaction was, oh, I'm glad, my mom and my aunt are getting the recognition. But on the other hand, it was like, why wasn't I contacted? And then when you see the video, and first of all, from what I could tell from the video, they did use one photo of Ethel, but the main photo that they used to make the announcement was of Ethel Johnson. But then they had another part of the video that actually used Miss Ethel's older sister, Babs Wingo, who actually was the first African-American female wrestler recruited by Billy Wolf into professional wrestling. So Babs Wingo, Ethel's older sister, actually was the first African-American woman to integrate pro wrestling. So first of all, the family was upset that Babs wasn't recognized as being the older sister and the one who went first before Ethel. They're taking nothing away from Miss Ethel and all of her accomplishments, of course, but they just wanted it to be clarified that Miss Ethel was the first world champion, but her older sister Babs was the original trailblazer who actually integrated pro wrestling, and then Babs went back and recruited her younger sister Ethel. So it was like they wanted that clarified, and then Miss Ethel had this trademark move, this drop kick that the WWE in their video actually used a clip of Sandy Parker, taking nothing away from Sandy Parker, but Sandy Parker entered the business years after the Wingo sisters, and also Marva Scott, the very youngest sister of Babs, Ethel, and Marva, was also a wrestling legend. So the family just kind of wanted some recognition that there were these three sisters who were like the Venus and Serena of their day, who integrated pro wrestling. And even if they didn't recognize Babs or Marva, at least accurately say that Ethel was the first first black female world wrestling champion, not the first actual wrestler. And then, don't use the correct footage, which this is not about me, but as I did an interview with the family for my YouTube channel, and in the interview, Kim Martin, the daughter of Marva Scott and the niece of Ethel Johnson, said, why they could have contacted me for photos and for footage to use, but I don't know where they got the photos and footage that they used. But just double check with the family to say, hey, is this accurate, or even just to let them know that Miss Ethel was being inducted. And what's puzzling is that the New York Times did a very long story about Ethel back in, I want to say it was November of 2019. So the New York Times contacted the family through me. They found out, I guess, I don't know how the New York Times found out about the Lady Wrestler documentary, but, as you said, there have been articles written about it. I've been on other podcasts and even local television here in Columbus. So it's not like there's no record of the documentary being out there about Ethel talking about her whole life and career in the documentary. So the New York Times managed to find me and said, hey, we would like to talk to a representative of the family for this, extended obituary and tribute we're doing to Ethel Johnson. They did, the New York Times did it properly, and the family really appreciated the New York Times doing it. So the family did, and I don't want to, I'm not the family spokesperson. I don't want to put words in their mouth. I think they just wanted the WWE to just kind of correct the video and give proper attribution to their mother's and aunt's title. That's really all they wanted. So that's the controversy. And I think because the WWE didn't reach out to them ahead of time, and as far as I know, haven't reached out to them since to correct the issue, I think that's why the family was upset. And no one, we all make mistakes. As a journalist, I've had to run corrections. That's part of being a human being. And part of being a mature adult is when somebody brings an error to your attention, yes, sometimes it's embarrassing and sometimes it's irritating. But you say, oh, I'm sorry, my bad. Let me correct it. That's all the family wanted. And let's throw a hypothetical out there. What if a boxing organization inducted Joe Louis into their Hall of Fame and they used footage of Joe Frazier? Do you think maybe the fans and the family and the estate of Joe Louis might be a bit perturbed? That's all it is just, we all make mistakes. Just cop to them and correct it. That's all they're asking for.
It's really interesting that you brought up the New York Times piece, because that was a major piece as well. And I was going to ask you about that, Chris. I mean, You're available. You're not a hard guy to reach. I
right.
sent you a message and you responded back pretty quickly. You're an easy guy to talk to. So I would imagine that if you can't find the family, which, obviously would have taken some effort, you're the perfect person to bridge that gap, because you've put so much work into telling this story and you created a whole documentary and what have you about it. I don't understand. And I'm talking to all of my friends in the WWE, and I know some of you listen to Duke Loves Rasslin. I appreciate that. I don't understand why someone didn't at the very least contact Chris about getting in touch with Miss Ethel's family and doing this thing the right way.
Right. And I want to be clear. This is not about me or me like trying to, throw my ego around and say, oh, I should have been recognized. It's not about me. It's all about Miss Ethel and her family. That's where the legacy is. But even if they didn't contact me, there was an exhibit that the Ohio History Connection, which is the statewide history organization in Ohio, did, where they had an exhibit where they included the history of Black women in wrestling. So they could have contacted the Ohio History Connection and said, do you know how we get in touch with Ethel Johnson's family? And they could have connected them with either the family or with me. So there were multiple avenues, not just me. They could have, for that matter, they could have contacted the New York Times reporter and said, just a simple Google search of Ethel Johnson would bring up the New York Times article, and contact that reporter and say, how did you speak to Shelley Adams? We see her quoted as being Ethel Johnson's daughter. How can we get in contact with her? So it's not all about me. There are multiple avenues through which they could have contacted the family.
They could have contacted WWE Hall of Famer Arnold Schwarzenegger. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because there are so many people who are still under contract with the WWE who have competed in what was once known as the Arnold Classic. So there's a strong relationship with, the Governator, the Terminator, the Arnold. Yeah. There's a strong relationship with Arnold, and I'm sure that the combination of your documentary, the New York Times article, and also, Arnold's organization recognizing Miss Ethel, I'm pretty sure all of those things combined helped get her on the WWE radar enough for them to say, you know what, we got to put her in the Hall of Fame. So again, I feel like, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself here. I'm not putting words in anybody else's mouth. WWE reach out, get to the family, make this right. And then more importantly, after that, let us know how you made it right. Okay.
Yes.
Don't just do it behind the scenes here. Actually put this out. We made a mistake. Here's how we fixed it. And this is what we're going to do going forward to make sure that we don't make similar mistakes, because we respect these wrestlers and their contribution to the industry. And we want to celebrate them and their family to the highest degree. That's what the Hall of Fame is about. So WWE,
Absolutely.
I'm telling you, bro, listen, WWE, you know, this is me talking now. Please get this right, because it's an easy fix. And right now,
Yes.
y'all looking kind of funky on this one. And on a personal level, I'm very frustrated and disappointed, because this was a slam dunk. It was easy. It was simple. You know what I mean? And it really bothers me to see that the family has been disrespected, and the legacy of Miss Ethel and her sister Babs has been disrespected in such a manner that was so avoidable. So
Yes, absolutely.
I'm hoping and praying that they get this thing right and they correct this issue, because there's no need for it. Chris, are you somebody now? Because you and I were talking offline a little bit, and I know that you're aware of pro wrestling. You consider yourself more of a casual pro wrestling fan as opposed to some kind of diehard or what have you.
Right.
But since this documentary, have you found yourself getting that itch again, where you're a little bit more interested in pro wrestling recently than you ever had been over the past few years that you kind of stepped away from it? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, of course, spending hours and hours researching any topic is going to pique your interest in it. So actually, this is a story I've told before, but I realized when I actually finished a cut of the documentary in 2017, I realized I had actually never been to a wrestling match in person. So I was like, I need to go actually see what I just made an entire movie about. So I went to WrestleCon in Orlando. They had a big women's wrestling tournament. And one of the things that struck me, and this is I think was a strength of being sort of more of a detached observer than, like a really, really passionate fan who's so close to the industry, is that at this big this big independent wrestling tournament, women's wrestling tournament, I noticed that the male fans in the audience were like extremely, extremely passionate, and were just yelling and screaming the whole time and running up to the women wrestlers after their matches and wanted to take selfies with them and high-fiving them. And the women who were in the audience were a little more subdued, kind of like ho-hum, I'm not really that impressed with what these girls are doing. And it just occurred to me that wrestling is one of the few sports in which women's wrestling, I should say, is one of the few sports in which women are the main attraction, but perhaps men are the main fans of the sport. I can't imagine a football stadium filled with men wanting to watch women's wrestling, or a golf course filled with men wanting to watch ladies golf. I just don't see that happening. Even the WNBA, I don't know how much of a huge passionate male fan base they have that are as passionate as male wrestling fans are about women's wrestling. So it just kind of struck me that a lot of male fans that enjoy women's wrestling would not label themselves as feminists, but they have this sort of egalitarian mindset where if you can wrestle, if you can do the holds and the moves, they don't really care about your gender. It's more about your skills. And I think that's something that's really underrated about wrestling. And I don't know that I would have been able to make that observation if I had been so close and so into it, and, that I couldn't kind of take a step back and say, this is really interesting. And actually earlier this year, because the wrestling industry is, of course, trying to slowly reopen as a lot of industries are. I went to the Ohio wrestling match, had a tribute to African-American wrestlers, where they had a small match, where it was just a small, socially distanced, everybody in the audience had to wear masks, at one of the fairgrounds here in Columbus. And Trish Adora, who's of course one of the rising independent Black female wrestlers, I got to meet her, and that was really cool. So yeah, I'm definitely getting more into it and kind of reacquainting myself with the sport for sure.
Chris, you might find yourself doing a piece on Trish Adora. I would love to. She's a military veteran. She is a rising star in the pro wrestling industry, as you said, and she is proud to be Black.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
when I say that's going to land on people who understand it, and it may go over a few heads. But when you live in a world where being marginalized, being mistreated, being picked over, being told that, black is supposed to be dirty, to the degree that to even say a person is black makes some people uncomfortable, which is part of the reason why the whole African American thing is so prominently used, because people think that it's somehow bad to say black. So when you see somebody take pride in their entire identity, including their race, like Trish Adora does, it gives you hope, because you know that pro wrestling, probably more than anything else, these are real life superheroes, and they're inspirational. People find strength in watching these real life superheroes, fight, whether it's good and evil, or go through the motions, win championships, lose championships, whatever. Somebody's going to see Trish Adora and they're going to say, you know something? She's comfortable in who she is. I'm comfortable in who I am.
Absolutely. And she's definitely a role model. And I have to, first of all, give a shout out to a filmmaker in DC named Antonio Hernandez. He actually already did a documentary about Trish Adora. And it's a short documentary. It's like maybe a half an hour. But that's how I found out about her, was through Antonio Hernandez. So I have to give a shout out to him. But I would love to do some kind of interview with Trish. In fact, I've contacted her through email, but we've just been kind of playing email tag. But she absolutely is a role model, especially for young black women. Absolutely.
Well, Trish Adora, I know you're listening right now. She's a great person and someone I'm in contact with. So we're going to find a way to put you two together there, Chris, because you do such great work that, whether it's an article or YouTube, whatever, it would be really, really a thrill on a personal level to see you and Trish interact and just what conversation comes out of that. Because it would be
an absolute thrill and honor for me. Absolutely.
Yes, sir. We'll do what we can to make that happen, because definitely you both of you are two people I'm fans of, and I love great storytelling, and to learn more about who she is, Trish Adora, literally somebody who every wrestling promotion on the planet should be doing all that they can to sign her, because she is that talented, and I think that she's only, like, her best years are ahead of her. We haven't even seen what she can do yet, So
she's definitely on the rise for sure.
100%. Which, it's interesting. And I brought up the journalism piece again, because I want to make this clear for everybody listening. Chris is not some wrestling website journalist guy. You're a journalist by trade. What do you cover primarily, Chris?
Yeah, so I cover a lot of different things. So my journalism now is mostly freelance. So I still actually cover a local community here in Columbus, and I cover everything from the most mundane, everyday things like zoning meetings to I actually just did a piece for a magazine about the history of a park here. A park that back in the 70s was like a gathering place. Every Sunday, the African American community would gather, and people like Dick Gregory would come and do speeches or performances. So historic, kind of continuing that, documenting the history of the Black community. And then I love pop culture and entertainment. So I've been a movie reviewer and like a concert reviewer, and I've gone and covered award shows. I've covered the BET Awards and the Essence Awards, and so anything having to do with pop culture, but I love documenting Black history as well. Just finding out things that, either I didn't know or that, maybe I was kind of vaguely aware of it, but kind of finding out the details. And I love that. It's like, it's funny because I wanted to, when I was really young, when I was like 9 or 10, I wanted to be an archaeologist because of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So it's almost like being an archaeologist where you're doing digs, but, virtually. And you're uncovering artifacts. So I love doing that.
Well, you have us all at bated breath here, Chris. Why don't you let everybody know what's the best way that they can check out what you're writing, what you're working on online, your social media, your websites, the whole 9 yards. What's the best way that people can follow you, Chris?
Yeah. So people want to see Lady Wrestler, it's available for streaming right now on Amazon Prime Video, and the website for the documentary where you can find more information about Ethel Johnson and her sisters Babs Wingo and Marva Scott and Ramona Isbell and women like them is LadyWrestlerMovie.com. There's a Lady Wrestler Facebook page, which is Facebook.com/LadyWrestlerMovie. Then you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Chris Bournea Writer like WRITER writer. And also I'm sorry, I just want to give a quick shout out to Raymond Lambert, who I wrote a book with called All Jokes Aside. It's the history of a comedy club in Chicago where a lot of big Black comedians like Dave Chappelle, D.L. Hughley, and Monique got their start. So that was a project I was actually working on simultaneously with Lady Wrestler, and that's available on Amazon as well.
You said that's available on Amazon as well. Is that I know it's in written form. Is there a movie as well?
Well, it is. There actually is a documentary called Funny Business, funny with a PH, because that was like the thing in the 90s, like Fat Farm and all of that kind of hip hop trend. So that I actually wasn't involved with the documentary. That was completed before I got involved with writing the book, but that's available. I believe you can watch it on Amazon as well, but there's also a website. If you just, I want to say it's Funny Business, the movie, but if you just Google Funny Business, the movie, or Funny Business documentary, it'll come up, and it has interviews with a lot of the comedians that perform there, like Steve Harvey and Cedric the Entertainer, and even like Carlos Mencia. It was sort of like the show, sort of like the Apollo of comedy clubs back in the 90s. That's
cool. That's really, really cool. I mean, you're a well-rounded individual, Chris, and so talented. So really appreciate you coming on the show this week. Before I let you go, everybody knows what's coming here except for you. I'm a foodie, Chris. I am a foodie. Yes. I love food. I feel like when it comes to building relationships with people, no matter where they're from in the world, if you can find some kind of common ground around food and music, then you can build a whole foundation off of that and build a relationship with somebody. So I'm going to ask you, before I let you go here, I'm on the road, right? I'm driving from Boston. I'm on the road. I find myself up there in Ohio. Yes. Where am I stopping? Anywhere in the state. Where am I stopping to grab a great meal that represents Ohio the best? Where am I going, and what am I ordering?
Well, a place that would be easy for you to find is centrally located. It's called the North Market. It's a huge indoor market where they have different food stalls. And there are a couple of Black-owned restaurants in this North Market. And one of the ones I love, and I'm sorry the name of the place is escaping me, but if you just ask anyone in the North Market, where is the Ethiopian restaurant? There is this bomb Ethiopian restaurant that has anything you could want, like chicken, goat, that bread, that vinegary type bread, injera. So I would go to the North Market and ask around for the Ethiopian restaurant, and that would bring you back to Columbus just to have that Ethiopian food. It's like the best Ethiopian food I've ever tasted.
Hi, this is Earl Oliver from Sully's Vintage Wrestling.
This is Raj Giri with WrestlingInc.com.
This is Sean Reed, boxing writer and undercover low-key wrestling fan, and you're listening to Duke Loves Rasslin. Woo!
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Blue Magic, one half of the Mixed Tag Show with Jenna and Blue, and you are listening to Duke Loves Rasslin.
My man, Blue Magic. Okay, so we got to talk about this now. Are you a big Jay-Z fan? Is that where this whole Blue Magic thing comes from?
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely an avenue of it. I'm a big Jay-Z fan. I'm part of a fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. My favorite color is blue. So it all came together. And I always liked the tagline of "It's a brand name like Pepsi, like you stand by it." And I always felt like I carried myself as a brand. So I always thought of myself like, "Yo, Blue Magic, ain't nobody else Blue Magic out here." So let me run with that.
That's all right. Now listen, there's different types of hair care products like Blue Wave, and there's also I think there's a Blue Magic hair care product.
There is a Blue Magic. My mom took a picture of it and sent it to me.
So you didn't grow up using that yourself, huh?
Not really. No, I come from a Haitian household, so we used to use the Crown Royal, the little red situation. It was like the red with a silver top.
Yeah. See, listen, man. I mean, my mom's Jamaican, but my father's from Mississippi, so all of that Murray's and Blue Magic, all that coconut oil based stuff that you put in your hair to make sure your waves are all tight. Got to have the waves now, Blue.
Yeah, definitely.
Although, man, I shave my head bald these days, so there ain't much waves going on these days. But it is.
Yeah, definitely, especially with the pandemic. I definitely went bald. Can't trust no barbers.
Yeah. Nah, man, better safe than sorry, brother. And when you shave it bald, you don't have to worry about it, so that makes it even better.
So, what do you use to shave your head? Because I use razors, right? And then I try to get like those, Freedom Grooming. I saw that on Instagram. My wife got it for me, and it's trash. So, I went back to razors. I can't, I'm trying to find something more easier than a razor to do the whole bald head thing.
So this is an exclusive now, because here on the Duke Loves Rasslin podcast, we are known for talking about a little bit of everything, including pro wrestling. So now we're going to talk about black men's hair care routines, specifically shaving our head bald. Okay. So I'm gonna let you in now. Here we go. So I have an art of shaving safety razor is what we call it. So you use the straight blades there. So it's a single blade joint, right? So I don't let the hair get too thick. If it gets too thick, then I'll just use a pair of clippers to bring it down. Then I'll start with that art of shaving safety razor, and I'll get all the hard to reach and sensitive spots, right? So after I do that, then I'll finish with a triple blade razor, like a Gillette Mach 3 or something along those lines there. I'll finish with that. But I got to be honest with you, Blue. One of the things that is important to me is the skincare aspect of the shaving. Because as you know, man, when you shave your head, it's easy to get irritation bumps and things like that.
Yeah.
So, so the aftershaves that you use, of course, you got to figure out what's best for your skin. But always use your aftershaves, your moisturizers. I definitely use coconut oil on my head afterwards to keep it moisturized. And even the shaving gels that I use, I always make sure I use something that also has a skin hydration mechanism in there too. I want to provide as much cushion and as much ease as possible when it comes to shaving, so you don't end up having ingrown hairs,
Yeah, I'm used to this. I balded my hair last year, right before my wedding, and then I've been doing balds ever since then. I've been just using the 3 blades. It's going straight back and cleaning up real nicely. I nicked my ear one time, had this nasty cut on my ear, so maybe I had to be a little bit more careful with it. But I do the lavendering with the shaving cream, and like you said, I make sure it's like irritation protection or something like that. And then I laven up, and then I do the balding. And then after that, I usually hop in the shower and I do the exfoliating with the gel, like you usually use for your face, I think. My boy told me to use it on my head because I have really dry scalp. So it was showing a lot at first. It's better now. So I've been exfoliating it afterwards with that. And then I use one of those scrub gloves that exfoliate my head. And then it's like this, I don't know what it's called. I forgot what it's called. It's in the bathroom. And it's like, you put it on your head afterwards. And it kind of stings a little bit. It's not really shaving, whatever you call it, but I don't know. It just helps it in terms of when your skin is exposed from exfoliating, helps the pores close up faster, I guess. And then my wife got me this tree oil or something like that I just spray on there, and I just rub it in, and it's been really good. It's been helping out pretty well. Now lately, I've been using a little bit of baby oil.
No, don't use that. Don't use that.
No,
don't use that on your head, bro. No, it actually will clog your pores. You don't want to do that.
Really?
Yeah, you'll get more ingrown hairs and stuff with the baby oil, man. Plus, the baby oil. Now, here's the problem: if you're walking around bare head outside, baby oil, the sun, you'll burn your head, man. There's no two ways about that.
See, I'm new to this. I'm still trying to learn.
I know we got to hip you to the game, but I'm going to add something to your routine, and I know that your wife already has it, so this is a good thing. You want to find a cleanser for your skin. Now, it's got to be a face cleanser. It's got to be something that really is serious about clearing up any kind of acne or any kind of thing.
That's what I use for exfoliating.
Put that on your head. Now, but that's different now. The exfoliator is you want to continue to use that too, but you want to have a regular cleanser in addition to that.
Okay.
Right.
To
it
do
will
afterwards.
keep your skin clear. Yeah. Well,
okay.
When you're in the shower.
Okay.
So it's like when you wash on your face, you're going to wash not only your face, but your head, the back of your neck, underneath your chin, all of those sensitive areas there. Right.
Okay. Got you.
The other part of this, which is very important, Blue, instead of just shaving front to back, don't be afraid. You got to shave different parts of your head differently.
Yeah, I know. I found that out the hard way. I was like, yo, I got patches in my head? I'm like, oh, yeah. Let me go across the other way. I learned how to, like, feel for the groove and see which way they're going. And then
That's it.
So I could shave against the grain, basically.
Yeah, you know what? I barely use a mirror anymore, man. I use my hands to feel where the patches are. And once everything is smooth, then I know that I finished the job. So that's the easiest way. But you got to take it easy, though. Don't use a brand new razor because you're more likely to cut yourself with a brand new razor.
Yeah, I tend to do that. When I feel like it's getting dull, I switch it up. But the best part about that is that I wear glasses. So when I'm shaving my head, I can't have my glasses on. So I'm already feeling around. I'm completely blind without my glasses.
Good. Yeah, stay away from the brand new razors on your head, to be honest with you, Blue. Use a razor that you've used on your face for a couple weeks. It sounds crazy, but trust me, it's better to have a blade that's slightly dull where you can control it. Because if you use a brand new blade and you press too hard, which happens, you will cut yourself. You're going to have nicks everywhere, bro. There's no two ways about that. You know?
Yeah.
So anyone listening to the Duke Loves Rasslin podcast, you literally just got about 8 minutes of hair care, skin care. You know what I'm saying? You're all ready now. But listen, I'll even post a couple of pictures on the social media and underneath this show and what have you here. I'm very serious about the skincare routine because, you know, we as Black men, we don't talk about this stuff enough. And I think there's a misconception that we're supposed to just walk around looking crazy with bumps on the back of our neck, bumps on the back. Yeah, that's not cool. Your wife don't want to see you looking like that.
Facts.
You know, and it's not comfortable. We fly dudes, man. We fly. We can't be walking around looking crazy. So, you know, the cleansers, the exfoliators, making sure, like you said, the tea tree oil, which is fantastic for the skin. And you gotta get a good aftershave, Blue.
Yes, I do gotta get aftershave. I have that. I don't know what it is. My boy I should go run and find out what it is. I'll text you later after this and let you know what it is. Like he got me having to do after I do the exfoliating and close up the pores. It stings a little bit, but I feel like it's doing its job so that I won't get no razor bumps or anything like that.
That's what you need, brother. Got to condition. Yeah, that's how you condition the skin. That's good stuff. That's good stuff, man. So listen, you watched WrestleMania, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so we just got finished up with WrestleMania 37. It was a return to somewhat what we would consider normal because there were live fans in attendance and what have you.
Yeah,
it was a little different this year, almost like a throwback where WrestleMania itself was a 2-night event, which is pretty interesting. You know, so I know a lot of shows are going to cover the whole card and go match by match. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I want to, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to mess around with the hors d'oeuvres. I want to get right to the heart of things here. Let's go straight for the meat and potatoes. So Blue Magic, tell me right now, brother, if you were to pick 3 positive takeaways from the entire, you know, nights 1 and night 2, and you can even throw NXT in there as well. What are your 3 positive takeaways for WrestleMania weekend in particular?
I'll say number 3, and I'm like, if anybody listens to the Mixed Tag Show with me and Jenna, you know I'm a big advocate for the women's division and the women's in general. I think one of the positive spots that's probably surprised most people is the unofficial hosting of Bayley. Like I feel like it just showed how diverse and how she can adapt to a situation that's not officially presented to her, right? Everybody's been talking all week, like, what is Bayley going to do at WrestleMania? And she showed up and basically was a better host than the actual hosts of the show. So it showed, again, that she could do whatever is asked of her and make it interesting. So I feel like to me, that's number 3. Like, she really held that down, unannounced, just popped up and held it down for WrestleMania weekend.
Okay, so that's 1. What's another one here? You got 2 more to go, Blue.
It's hard with this weekend, right? I'll go Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre. They surprised me. I didn't look forward to this feud at all. I was, if anybody followed me again, I was really for Bobby Lashley versus Brock Lesnar. I felt like this would have been a time to perfectly do it. You're getting crowd back. You know what I'm saying? You're getting your fans back. We haven't seen Brock in over a year. We've been I feel like they've had this parallel career for the past, 15, 17 years. And Bobby Lashley's been calling out Brock out in the open on every media touch he has been doing. And when he basically won the title, I felt like it was a good time to move Drew McIntyre into another program and invite Brock in, because then it'll create another angle to it where Paul Heyman's with Roman Reigns, his arch nemesis, essentially. And I feel like it would have been a good road to go with, but it didn't go that way. But even though we had a great match with Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley came out looking strong, took 3 future shocks, actually 4, I believe, altogether, kicked out, and still won the match, nice and clean. So that'd be the second one for me. And then, of course, number 1, which I think should be on everybody's number 1's list, is the main event of the weekend. Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair for the women's title, SmackDown women's title. I feel like both of those women really delivered, man. It was a very emotional thing to watch with my wife. I really enjoyed every aspect of it. If anybody knows, I've been rooting for Sasha for the past 6-7 years from NXT days. And to see her get that moment, it was really emotional for me. I've been riding with Bianca since she hit the scene as well. I was one of the first people to get the EST shirts, and because I travel a lot to Orlando. So watching the 2 of my favorites go in the ring, it was just very, very. And seeing 2 black women main event of WrestleMania, it just meant something very, very special to me.
That was a good call, man. Good call, 100%. And I agree with everything that you said there. I will definitely say for me, the number 1 positive takeaway is just women's wrestling in general. Women of color were strongly represented on this WrestleMania card, especially in the top spots.
Yeah.
For the weekend itself, or NXT and then both nights of WrestleMania, women headlined. You know what I mean? Yeah. 2 of those spots, which is a big deal. That's a very big deal. And women of color came out on top. Whether we're talking Victoria Gonzalez, shout out to Victoria there, or whether we're talking about or what is she? Excuse me, Raquel. I called her by her real name.
Yeah.
Raquel Gonzalez there. Or we're talking about Bianca Belair, which is fantastic. And, shout out to Bayley, shout out to Charlotte Flair, and shout out to Sasha Banks. I think the 3 of them did a fantastic job of doing all that they could to help Bianca get to this point. I feel like when you really think about it, Bianca's still relatively new to the industry, and it's not like she was making her bones on the indies or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? So the learning curve is pretty steep. So the fact that she's already a champion, the fact that she's already headlined WrestleMania and walked out champion, I just think that is just tremendous. A star is born. I love it. It's fantastic. So the women definitely number 1 for me. Number 2.
I'm sorry to cut you off. If you think about where Bianca has came from, like 2 years ago when she had that takeover match against, I want to say, was it Shayna Baszler? And she lost that match, and you could tell that she didn't feel like herself in that match, and she was very disappointed. And Triple H telling her, to stay encouraged and that she got this. And then 2 years later, to reach the point that she reached, it's unheard of.
Agreed 100%. And once again, this is somebody who does not have a wrestling background at all in any way, shape, or form.
No family, nothing.
To be nothing. So to be at the top of the mountain like that is just a testament to how fantastic and talented she is. And also her peers. Her peers being willing to share the spotlight, to step out of the way so Bianca can step in at the top of the mountain there and be herself and be her best self. I just think that's fantastic. I mean, it's clear that especially Sasha, especially Bayley, especially Charlotte, they support Bianca because they have given a lot to make this new star. You know what I mean? Pro wrestling is not one person can't do it on their own. You really need a lot of unselfish people, or at the very least, business people who understand the aspect of business, like, hey, it's somebody else's time to shine. you really need them to cooperate in order for you to be a star. You know what I'm saying? Because at any time, yeah, man, at any time, Charlotte, at any time, Bayley, at any time, Sasha, they could have injured Bianca. They could have told Vince McMahon she ain't ready. They could have made all the excuses in the world for why she shouldn't be where she is today. And they didn't do that. In fact, if you look at the history, all they've ever done is put her over both verbally and also in the ring. They've taken a lot of time to make sure that she looks as great as she can look, which has allowed her to have more confidence in the ring. And that's why she's in a position where she deserves to be champion, because she's that damn good. You know what I'm saying? So it's really a beautiful testament to what happens when people work together and they put business ahead of themselves. And when you want to see somebody win, when you want to see somebody succeed, and I think that's also a testament to Bianca as a person, because if she was a jerk, I don't know if this would have happened.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, so
you see the business before yourself.
Exactly. So she's not putting herself before everybody else. She was humble in the way that she's carried herself. I think they recognize that, and that's why these women have gotten behind her. And the end result is just, the sky's the limit for everybody. Everybody wins in this situation. So once again, shout out to Bianca Belair. For me, number 2 is The Miz and Morrison. And really, to a certain extent, Damian Priest as well. I feel like the three of them doing everything humanly possible to put Bad Bunny in a position where he could look as strong as a guy who is not a wrestler, a guy who clearly is not the greatest athlete in the world. I mean, he's smaller than you and I, Blue. You know what I'm saying? Right. It's like, for this guy to look as good as he did in the ring, Bad Bunny, I just think that is incredible. And also shout out to Adam Pearce. Shout out to Drew Gulak. I mean, they trained him for the past 7-8 months. Bad Bunny looked incredible.
And honestly, I was thinking it was about when they brought the commercial up with Triple H. I thought it was about to announce him being in the Money in the Bank. The way the briefcase came out, I was like, they might have put this man in the Money in the Bank next. Oh this was.
I would have been okay with that just by the way that he performed at WrestleMania. Bad Bunny,
he took it very seriously.
He respects the business, and no disrespect to any other celebrities. I think Floyd Mayweather put a lot of effort in as well, so I'm going to give him his props when he fought the Big Show. But we've seen other people not take it as seriously. Bad Bunny, with the exception of Pat McAfee, who legitimately, he continued to do program and stuff like that. I would say Bad Bunny took this as seriously as any celebrity we've ever seen, and he didn't have to do that. You know what I'm saying? So for that reason,
when it comes to Pat McAfee, though, okay. I don't put them in the same breath, only because Pat McAfee's been around backstage. He's been looking for some kind of job or whatever the case may be. That's why I never like the comparison between the two, because Pat McAfee's basically, he does his show on a podcast and he's trying to find his way into the wrestling business. It's well known.
True.
Bad Bunny's is in the peak of his career right now as an artist. This reminds me of like when Dennis Rodman used to go out there in the middle of playoff time to get, what I'm saying, because they love the business that much. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And that's such a positive thing for the wrestling industry as a whole, because that's what you need. You need people who actually give a damn. Stop giving these opportunities to these celebrities who don't add anything other than a payday for themselves. Facts. You know what I'm saying? And Bad Bunny is a prime example of somebody who gives a damn about pro wrestling. So he came into pro wrestling, dedicated some time in order to learn what the hell he was doing so he wouldn't hurt anybody out there. And then he put on a great performance. So shout out to everybody involved. Yeah, it was great. Shout out to everybody involved in that. I think that was just a wonderful thing. And, my last takeaway, in all honesty, is just the fans. I feel like everybody, whether you've been happy with the WWE or not, I feel like everybody got wrapped up in the emotion of WrestleMania, and it felt good to feel that feeling again, because we know what it felt like to have it taken away from us.
Definitely.
You know what I'm saying?
And and just to get that old part of McMahon coming out and hitting us with the old line, "Welcome to WrestleMania." Like I was at home and I stood up and clapped. Like it gave me that feeling again. Like, oh my God, we're back to what we was before, and it was a very good feeling.
It was a good feeling, and unfortunately, I felt like that might be one of the last times we'll see Vince do that. Yeah. So it was bittersweet in that regard. I really felt like if we never see him do that again, that's a very strong possibility. Because again, think about what we've gone through with the pandemic over the past year. No one's tomorrows are promised, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't realize how much it meant to me to see Vince McMahon do his voice, stand out there in front of everybody with all the wrestlers around him and say exactly what you just said. Welcome to WrestleMania. I didn't realize how important that was to me until he did that this week. And it was like, oh yeah, this is actually, that's it. You know what I'm saying? Like it got me back into the groove, man. So that was deep. That was a beautiful thing there. So we talked about the positive takeaways, the top 3 positive takeaways. What about your top 3 not so positive takeaways, Blue?
One of the minuses I take away is that night 2 didn't deliver like night 1. Like it was even close. So it shows the difference and what matters to the corporation, to the business in a sense. Like I think I said this in a group that we're in, and I said this to a few people. It felt like it was a 50-50 booking where Vince was like, all right, night 1, I'm gonna give y'all what y'all want, but night 2, it's all me. So in that sense, and I feel like he missed on a lot of things when it came to night 2, and it just didn't feel like WrestleMania on night 2. It just felt like that should have been Raw. You know what I mean? Like, and in the sense of even with the main event between Roman Reigns, Daniel Bryan, and Edge, it was a cool match, but did it feel like a WrestleMania main event? And then another thing I'll take away from the weekend is the tag division. To me, like I love the tag division, and I feel like they could do so much more. And the only thing we got tag division wise was the Raw Tag Team Championship, which was a very good match. Like I'm not putting nothing against that, but we didn't see the SmackDown Tag Team titles. We didn't see anything that approved the tag team division overall outside of who won the Raw Tag Team titles. And I feel like the tag team division, like the women division to an extent, has suffered a lot for whatever reason. And I really wish that they would like refocus on that. And the number one thing I took away from the whole weekend is that a lot of people's favorites are, because of poor booking in the past, is suffering right now in a sense of like, now Sasha, and again, I've said this on the Mixed Tag Show with Jenna, this takes nothing away from what we said about Bianca. She deserved it and everything like that. The reason why it stings for us Sasha fans is because now she's 0-6 at WrestleMania. For Asuka, she's 0-4 at WrestleMania. For the New Day, outside of Kofi winning the title when he did, they're like 0-3 and so on and so forth. Bray Wyatt is 0-4. I don't count the match he had with John Cena last year because nobody even knew what that was. But like a lot of people, if you just booked them a little bit differently and made them more secure and who they are, this WrestleMania wouldn't have hurt as much as it did. Like why was, The Fiend losing to Randy Orton after one RKO? When we've seen, after he's been burnt alive, and we've seen what he went through with Seth Rollins in Hell in a Cell, one RKO just diminished his whole character, in my opinion. So I just took that away. Like it hurt a lot of people this time around.
Definitely insightful stuff there, Blue. And again, I don't disagree with you one bit. On a personal level, I got to say that my number one issue with WrestleMania this year was the fact that Hulk Hogan, of all people, was a co-host of the show. I mean, Hulk Hogan.
I don't really acknowledge that, man. I just put that man out my brain. Like, yo, get away.
I don't blame you. He is a self-described racist. And I don't think enough people acknowledge this fact. The man is on camera describing himself as a racist, and he has not done anything to atone for his racism. He's a selfish bastard, in my opinion. So I wasn't happy about him hosting, and I wasn't happy that Titus was put in a situation where he had to provide cover for Hulk Hogan, because I'd like to believe that Titus is a quality human being that doesn't deserve that crap,
Yeah.
So I'm disgusted with the WWE over that, and I'm disappointed in the WWE over that. The WWE does not need Hulk Hogan right now. They don't need him
at all anymore.
And Hulk Hogan doesn't need the money. Hulk Hogan doesn't need the money. So, I mean, Hulk Hogan sued Gawker and took the whole company down. And I think he won, what is it, like $50-60 million. So even if he got half that amount, Hulk Hogan does not need WWE money. Give me a break. Okay.
And
so we're just doing this to stoke his ego. Forget his ego. Okay.
It's past the generation, to be honest with you.
Yeah, bro. Yeah, bro. Most of these kids watching today never saw Hulk Hogan wrestle. Give me a break. Or at least they weren't alive to see it. So I got a problem with that. My second issue of the weekend was just the whole notion of having WrestleMania outdoors. I think it was just a piss poor decision. And you saw with the rain delays, which really they're lucky that it didn't get worse.
Yeah.
So I think you got to go with an indoor event. And I understand with COVID and with live fans, I know that there was logic behind what they did. So don't get me wrong here. But at least
when was the last time they had an indoor?
Where you could close it. What's that?
When was the last time they had an indoor WrestleMania, though?
That's a good question. I don't even know. That's a very good question.
They haven't done that in a while. They've been doing all these stadiums, and I think the only stadium that has the traction to do open and close is when they go to Dallas.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Well, they got to figure that out. But I'm not a fan of the outdoor business because there's too many variables that get in the way. And again, I understand with COVID, there was logic behind it, but I also understand the fact that Mother Nature has her own ideas. So you got to be careful. And from a safety standpoint, you're taking less risk on one end and you're increasing risk on another end. That could have been a disaster. So I was a little concerned about that. You know,
and it's not the first time they had a rain at the WrestleMania. So I went to WrestleMania in Orlando. I think that was WrestleMania 35. It rained. It's not a fun experience sitting in the rain and watching people wrestle.
So what did you do? Like how did you deal with that, Blue?
I think we had ponchos. I believe, while we was out there. To deal with the rain while I was in Orlando. We had ponchos sitting out there watching. That's not to say it wasn't fun. Like you're cold and wet, and you're watching wrestling. You got to wait till the rain stop. And of course, it's Florida, so it doesn't last that long. But just to be in that atmosphere for like 20, 25 minutes, it wasn't good. Then your seats is wet, and then yeah, that
is very interesting. I didn't even realize that you had that experience your own self there. So that's
I've been to WrestleMania a few times. I had the pleasure.
Now, see, I haven't, and you know, I'm still disappointed because last year we were supposed to have WrestleMania here in Boston, and I had a lot of things going on associated with that, and it got taken away from us because of COVID. So,
I'm sorry to hear
you know
that.
what I mean? I'm still, yeah, man, I'm still bummed about that.
I thought it was Tampa last year, no? Or Tampa was supposed to be this year?
No. But yeah, Tampa was supposed to be this year. It was supposed to. We won the bid. It was supposed to be here in Boston.
Oh yeah.
Because it didn't work out, unfortunately. Which it is what it is.
See, you should have came to Jersey.
Yeah, maybe next time. Maybe next time. But my other issue, my other issue, and I'm gonna. It's not my number one issue, but it's my number 3 issue. I thought BB Rexha did a horrendous job singing, and I got to be honest with you. I don't understand why the WWE didn't use Lillian Garcia. I think that we really got to sit here and think about this here. Lillian Garcia should have opened WrestleMania Night 1 with singing, whether it's the national anthem, America the Beautiful, whatever. That would have made more of an impact. They brought in BB Rexha, and there's no disrespect to her. I know she's a pop star and all that good stuff there, but she wasn't necessary, and she did not do her best work, and that's just a fact. So, my bodyguard was here, and she was like, "Who the hell is that singing?" And she came out, she was like, "Oh, she is not hitting the notes." And I said, "That's BB Rexha." That's BB Rexha. So that tell you everything you need to know.
Wait, what song? What's the popular song for her?
Man, I don't even know. I know she's a pop star and she's somebody, but it's just disappointing. And the WWE has to do a better job than that because it's WrestleMania. They got to do better than that. And when you have somebody like Lillian Garcia, who is always ready to go and who's proven in that environment, why would you use her? She's part of the family. Use her, man. Come on, give me a break. So those are my 3 not so positive takeaways there. But overall, I thought it was a nice for nostalgia, and overall, I thought it was pretty cool just to feel some type of normalcy again for a change. So you know that was nice. Blue, before I let you go, I want to ask you about Stone Cold Steve Austin's podcast there. You know, that deal he has with WWE. He had Chris Jericho, who was under AEW contract. He had Chris Jericho on his show. What's your take on that whole deal there? Do you think it was a smart move on all parties to do this kind of cross branding, or do you think that was a mistake for somebody?
It was good on AEW's part, that's for sure. You know, I'm not too hard on AEW, though I do think they need some things they need to work on. But I like to root for the underdogs. But yeah, it was good on AEW's part. I don't know so much on WWE side, because I feel like it kind of was one of those things that they left the door open for him to let him know that it's okay to come back home if he ever needs to. Because that's probably one of the biggest stars from the Attitude Era. Was it the Attitude Era? Can we consider it the Attitude Era? I always felt like the Attitude Era was after Stone Cold beat.
No, Jericho can be considered Attitude Era. He's Attitude Era. He's at the tail end, but he's in. He's in.
Yeah, because I was for me, like I always have to say this. I feel like the Attitude Era ended the moment that Stone Cold pinned Shawn Michaels at that WrestleMania. Like it just changed the entire landscape for everything. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion for another time. So I feel like it's one of those things where he was very, lucrative for the company. It's one of those things that I would keep him close. And he's always been, if like this, you could tell from the stories that Jericho was telling, he was always one of Vince's good guys, like one of his, people. So I think it was just one of those things where it's like, it's just Chris Jericho, let him do whatever you want to do. I don't think it would be the same thing extended to Cody Rhodes. He wanted to go on the Rogan Skull with Stone Cold. So I think it was just, it didn't really hurt WWE to let it happen. It didn't help them either.
Now, see, Blue, we spent all this time having a great conversation. We didn't disagree on anything. And then you got to turn around and just completely say something crazy. So,
what did I say?
First of all, Chris Jericho is a small-time player. He will always be a mid-card guy. Even when he was champion, he was still not the top guy in the company. He was not the top draw. He was not the biggest deal. He's a bit player. He's not Ric Flair. He's not Hulk Hogan. He's not John Cena. He's not Brock Lesnar. He's not The Rock. He's Chris Jericho. Okay? Chris Jericho.
So you don't think Chris Jericho is you don't think he's up there with those guys a little bit?
Let me tell you something.
He beat The Rock in The Rock and Stone Cold in the same night?
Of course they did. He beat all those guys in the same match, same night, became the unified champion, and no one gives a damn. Chris Jericho is a small-time player, okay? And I think that, I'm going to be honest with you, the only winners in this situation are Jericho, Stone Cold, and the WWE. I actually feel bad for Tony Khan and AEW because Jericho pulled a fast move on him. And I'm going to tell you how, Blue. Jericho, he knew that this was his opportunity to put himself over at the expense of everybody else. If I was Tony Khan, I would never have let Jericho do that without having Stone Cold reciprocate. Okay, you want Jericho on your podcast on the WWE Network? No problem. Stone Cold has to come on Jericho's podcast, and it's going to be an AEW special, and we're going to air that on TNT so we can get the ad revenue from that. So that way we get something as a company as well by having our top guy do something with the other side. I think it was ridiculous of Tony Khan to take his top entity and allow him to go back home for that one moment there and feel good again over there, and he get nothing in return. He literally got nothing in return. I think it's embarrassing.
Before I respond to that,
and Blue, I think the tag team champions in the background think it's embarrassing too. So just for the record, there, I can hear the kids agreeing with him.
No, they're definitely not. They're trying to get ready for dinner. The funny thing is that when you say go back home, I automatically thought about when I forgot who LeBron was playing for, and he went back to it was Miami. He was playing for Miami, and I think he skipped the game to go to Cleveland to go see Ilgauskas get his championship ring. And it was a big thing. Was it a championship ring? Or no, it wasn't a championship ring. I think it's retiring his number. And LeBron missed the game with Miami to go watch Ilgauskas retire his number at a Cleveland game. And everybody was like, that's the seed when LeBron's going to go back to the Cavs. And he ended up going back to the Cavs and bringing them that championship. So that's funny when you said that. That's automatically the first thing I thought of. I can see your point.
But you just proved my point, Blue. You just proved my point.
I can see your point. But I don't think it was completely a loss on the AEW side because, again, they got their name possibly to a crowd that probably would never heard of AEW in the first place. We can't always expect that. Everybody,
come on, Blue.
We can't always expect everybody that watches wrestling. There's a lot of WWE diehards that probably don't even know that AEW existed until they saw the AEW title and said the name. You can't say
there's not a single person who watched that and said, "Oh, I'm going to watch AEW now." No. You know what they did? They said, "Oh, look, Chris Jericho's back in the WWE superstar Chris Jericho." I think it's embarrassing for you to not admit the fact that Tony Khan basically was conned by Chris Jericho.
I'm not disagreeing that.
Chris Jericho.
I'm not disagreeing that. Like I said, the moment you said that, the first thing I thought about was LeBron and how he going back and everything like that. I agree with you on that aspect, but I don't think it was a complete loss for AEW. I think they might have gained a couple from that. They might gain a little something. A crumb.
Not a single person is going to turn on AEW and watch their program because Jericho was on Stone Cold's podcast. It ain't gonna happen, Blue. It ain't gonna happen, Blue.
You can't say zero.
It's a crumb. Happen, Blue. Zero.
If Chris Jericho brings over, let's say Chris Jericho brought over like 150 people. That's still 150 people that they didn't have.
Chris Jericho can't even bring over one person. It ain't gonna happen, Blue. It's not gonna happen.
I don't know. I think it's possible. It's possible.
All right. You know what, Blue? Despite the fact that you had to mess around and say something crazy to me, I still respect you. Why don't you let everybody know what's the best way they can check out your podcast?
Make sure you follow us at the Mixed Tag Show on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, on all podcast platforms, on YouTube. If you want to follow me personally, I'm at Blue Magic Grind, spell how it sound, on Instagram and on Twitter and on Twitch. I do some gaming now on Twitch. I'm gonna be doing some indie wrestlers interviews as well on my Twitch, so look out for that. I got a clothing company called For Your Wear. You can check that out, FORURWEAR. Shout out to my tag team host, Jenna Baby, Miss Jenna Baby, BAYBEE, president of the Sasha Crew, appointed by Sasha Banks. So make sure you follow her as well. And that's all my avenues right there.
You know, Blue, before I let you go, man, I'm a big fan of your co-host. I think she is very insightful. She knows her wrestling. But the other day, in fact, it was yesterday, you were doing a Twitch stream, and the poor young lady, she lost her voice.
At WrestleMania.
And she was very hoarse. So I want to know right now, Blue, why didn't you do what you were supposed to do and give her some soup jaumont? Okay, why didn't you give her some of the soup, some of the Haitian soup? Okay, she could have had a sac passe voice. She would have been all set. Okay, where was the soup jaumont? I don't understand what the hell's going on here, Blue.
There was no soup jaumont because social distancing. She lives in New York. I'm in Jersey, and I didn't even know she lost her voice until I called her that day, and I'm like, "All right, you ready for tonight? We're running down. What are we gonna talk about?" I'm like, "Wait, what happened to your voice?" She's like, "Oh, I didn't tell you. I lost my voice." I'm like, "What you mean?" So this is like an hour before we have to record. So I'm like, "Yo, go get some tea, put some steam on your face." I'm giving her all the remedies I know from doing radio, and I'm like, "Yeah, go do that, please."
You told her to do everything, but you wouldn't give her some Haitian soup. I don't know.
It was too late.
I don't know.
It was too late.
Mr. Tony Schiavone, and we're desperately out of time on Duke Loves Rasslin.